My seemingly placid suburban life, all manicured lawns and quiet evenings, shattered into a nightmare when my HOA dispatched bulldozers to demolish my home, all because of a simple security gate. What they failed miserably to check, however, was who exactly they were messing with. What happens when the homeowner you've relentlessly harassed turns out to be the state senator, chairing the very committee that oversees housing regulations? Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Honestly, I never wanted any trouble. All I craved was a measure of safety for my family. But beneath the manicured lawns of Oak Ridge Estates, a chilling wave of fear had begun to ripple. The Wilson family, just 2 doors down, endured a terrifying robbery last month, their kids home alone, frozen in fear. The very next week, intruders broke into the Martinez house while they were sleeping. When dear old Mrs. Henderson's home became the third target on our block, a primal need to protect my teenage daughter Olivia roared to life. The security gate wasn't ostentatious, just a simple, elegant black iron design that perfectly complemented our house's architecture. Before even ordering it, I meticulously scoured every single rule in the thick HOA handbook, ensuring full compliance. Olivia helped me pick it out, her eyes bright with excitement. "It looks just like the ones in Ashley's neighborhood, Mom. The really nice ones," she declared. To my relief, even our regular delivery driver commented, saying he felt much safer leaving packages securely behind the gate now. The peace lasted exactly 3 days. Then, Brenda Milligan appeared. I saw her coming through our front window while I was starting dinner, power walking up our driveway with fierce determination, clad in her blindingly bright tennis outfit, clutching that enormous sparkly water bottle she paraded on her morning fitness walks, which were, in reality, thinly veiled gossip sessions with her cronies. "That gate has to go, now," she announced, planting her hands firmly on her hips before I could even utter a greeting. Her expensive running shoe tapped an impatient rhythm on my welcome mat. "It makes the entire neighborhood look like some kind of prison." This, coming from the same Brenda Milligan, who'd installed shockingly bright purple shutters on her own house last spring without a whisper of HOA approval. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I attempted to explain, calmly, about the recent spate of break-ins, even offering to show her the police reports I'd gathered. She cut me off mid-sentence with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Well, I'm on the HOA board now," she declared haughtily, "and this simply will not do. It lowers the aesthetic standard. What's next? Guard towers?" She actually glanced around my yard, as if genuinely expecting to see watchtowers looming over my flower beds. Her dismissal was absolute. That very night, I found the first official warning letter printed on garish orange paper, stuck aggressively to the gate with thick tape. The next morning, at the ungodly hour of 7 a.m., Brenda was back outside, snapping pictures of my house with her phone. I watched through the kitchen window, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach, as she meticulously documented every angle, like a crime scene investigator gathering evidence. The aggression was startling. Something felt distinctly off about how quickly that warning had materialized. That evening, I decided to check the county property records and the official HOA incorporation documents online. It turned out Brenda had only been appointed to the board 2 weeks prior, hastily filling a vacancy left by someone who'd abruptly moved away. According to the HOA bylaws I found meticulously archived online, her appointment hadn't even been formally ratified by a membership vote yet. Alarmingly, the next day, 5 other neighbors received similar warning letters for incredibly minor infractions, things like unapproved tulip colors and excessive bird feeder height. Every time I drove past Brenda's house, she seemed to be on her phone, likely reporting yet more perceived violations. I started keeping a detailed log, documenting dates, times, and incidents, though I didn't fully grasp yet just how crucial that log would become. But what truly cut deep was the impact on Olivia. She started taking the long, circuitous route home from school to avoid passing Brenda's house. "Mom," she whispered one evening, her eyes welling up. "Ashley Milligan told everyone at school our house is bringing down property values. Is that why Kevin didn't invite me to his birthday party?" My heart fractured, seeing the worry and hurt clouding her usually bright face. This wasn't just about a gate anymore. It was about my child feeling ostracized in her own neighborhood. That night, sleep evaded me. I found myself poring over the HOA's financial reports again, noticing something I'd previously glossed over. Right after Brenda joined the board, they had suddenly started incurring significant expenses for emergency property consultations. The amounts seemed suspiciously high for our relatively small neighborhood association. Where was this money really going? As I finally closed my laptop, weary and frustrated, a car drove slowly past our house for the third time that evening. Through the sheer curtains, I could clearly see Brenda in the passenger seat, her phone's camera flash momentarily illuminating the darkness. A cold chill traced my spine. Had installing that simple gate somehow cracked open a Pandora's box of something far more insidious than just neighborhood aesthetics? My phone buzzed. It was a text from Maria, my legislative assistant at the state capitol. "Senator, reminder. Housing Committee hearing tomorrow at 9 a.m. Need to finalize agenda. Want me to reschedule?" I almost replied yes, exhaustion pulling at me. But a strong intuition, honed by years in politics, told me I might need that specific legislative knowledge and the authority that came with my position much sooner than I anticipated. I had no idea just how right that gut feeling would prove to be. Looking out at my gate one last time before heading to bed, I noticed a small group of figures gathered at the end of my driveway, pointing and taking notes in the dim streetlight. Even in the dark, I recognized the distinctive swagger of Arthur Pendleton, the HOA president, a man who hadn't seemed to enforce a single rule until Brenda arrived on the scene. What fresh hell were they planning now? And why? Why did they care so obsessively much about one simple, elegant security gate? The onslaught intensified the next morning. Predictably, Brenda was stationed in her driveway at dawn, coffee mug in one hand, phone camera relentlessly aimed at my house in the other. I watched from my kitchen window, sipping my own coffee as she zoomed in, first on the gate, then my flower beds, then even my mailbox. The HOA's ludicrous $100 daily fines were stacking up, a constant, gnawing pressure, but I refused to back down. 3 verified break-ins on our street in less than a month, and this was their priority? My gate's aesthetic. My daughter Olivia's car pulled into the driveway after school. But she wasn't alone. Following closely behind her were Brenda's kids, Ashley and Kevin, phones held high, aggressively recording her every move. I rushed outside, my blood boiling, just in time to hear them shouting cruel taunts. "Your mum's a criminal. She doesn't follow the rules. Your ugly gate makes our street look trashy." Olivia fled inside, sobbing, slamming her bedroom door shut. The sound echoed the cracking of my own composure. I tried calling Arthur Pendleton, the elusive HOA president, for the 5th time that week. Straight to voicemail, yet again. Fine. If they wanted war, they would get it. I grabbed my laptop and started digging through county property records with a vengeance. If Brenda and Arthur wanted to play the violation game, I needed ammunition. What I uncovered made my blood boil with righteous fury. Brenda Milligan's lavish pool extension built just last summer. It clearly crossed her property line by a good 3 feet, encroaching on her neighbor's yard. There were absolutely no permits filed, no HOA approval documentation whatsoever, just like Arthur Pendleton's oversized garage edition, which had somehow materialized without a single required city inspection. The hypocrisy was staggering. Just then, my doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Rodriguez from next door, her hands trembling as she hesitantly handed me a stack of papers. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Brenda, she's been going door to door all day, making everyone sign this petition demanding your gate be removed immediately. She told us that if we didn't sign, she'd start finding violations on our houses too." I thanked her, my heart aching for her fear, and grimly added the coerced petition to my rapidly growing evidence file. That evening, while walking my dog, I noticed Brenda's car following me slowly down the street. She wasn't even attempting subtlety anymore. It was pure intimidation. I paused, turned, and offered her a polite, deliberate wave. The look of sheer fury that flashed across her face was almost comical. Moments later, my phone buzzed. Another official HOA violation notice delivered via email. Suspicious behavior observed during non-business hours. The irony was not lost on me. Olivia came home from school the next day in fresh tears. That was a new low, even for Brenda. Her daughter Ashley had apparently spread vicious rumors at school, telling classmates that we were secretly drug dealers, hiding illicit activities behind our fortress-like gate. The situation escalated to the point where the school counselor called me in for a concerned discussion. I sat there, outwardly calm, listening to their well-meaning worries, knowing I couldn't yet reveal my position as a state senator without potentially compromising the larger investigation I was building. Not yet. That weekend, I installed several high-quality, discrete security cameras around my property. Within an hour, Brenda was back at my door, this time flanked by 2 uniformed police officers, dramatically claiming I was illegally surveilling her property. Thankfully, the officers were professional and saw through her act immediately. "Ma'am," one officer stated patiently, pointing clearly, "these cameras are aimed directly at Senator Vance's own house and yard, well within her property lines. There's no violation here." Brenda stormed off in a huff, but not before spitting, "This isn't over. You'll regret this." She was right about one thing. It wasn't over. On Monday morning, I discovered my beautiful, prize-winning rose bushes, the ones my late husband planted, completely dead, leaves blackened and shriveled. Someone had poured bleach or some other caustic chemical on them overnight. My newly installed cameras caught Brenda's husband skulking near the bushes around 2 a.m. But when I presented the clear footage to Arthur Pendleton, he squinted at the screen and claimed it was inconclusive. That very same afternoon, the HOA board hastily posted a new emergency rule on the community bulletin board. All exterior security cameras must receive prior written approval from the Architectural Review Committee chaired by Brenda Milligan, effective immediately. The blatant retaliation was breathtaking. I stayed up late again, meticulously documenting everything, cross-referencing dates, times, photos, emails, and neighbor testimonies. I was building an airtight case. The selective enforcement, the constant harassment, the documented bullying of my daughter, the clear property violations the board conveniently ignored for themselves and their friends. Around midnight, Olivia knocked softly on my office door. "Mom?" she said, her voice small and weary. Maybe we should just take down the gate, please? I can't take much more of this." I pulled her into a tight hug, my own eyes stinging. Seeing the defeat in her eyes solidified my resolve. "No, sweetie," I whispered fiercely. "We don't give in to bullies. Hold on, just a little longer. Tomorrow changes everything." The certified letter from my official Senate office, formally requesting specific HOA documents and announcing an inquiry, was already en route to the HOA board. This time, they wouldn't be able to ignore it. As I turned off my office lights much later that night, I saw them again through the window. Brenda and Arthur Pendleton in her driveway, heads bent together under the dim streetlight. Brenda held what looked like a measuring tape, studying my house intently, while Arthur pointed and took notes. My phone suddenly lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Remove the gate by morning, or we remove it for you." A slow, cold smile spread across my face. I saved the message as Exhibit Z and finally went to bed. Let them try. They had absolutely no idea what storm was about to break over their heads. Little did they know, tomorrow wasn't just another day for a potential HOA confrontation. It was also the day I was scheduled to formally announce my appointment as the new chair of the State Housing Committee. But for now, I watched through my own security cameras as Brenda and Arthur plotted their next move in the darkness, completely oblivious that they were about to bulldoze their way into the biggest, most catastrophic mistake of their lives. The ungodly roar of heavy machinery jolted me awake at precisely 6:15 a.m. It wasn't just loud, it vibrated through the entire house. Olivia burst into my room, her face pale with panic. "Mom, Dad, there are bulldozers outside, on our lawn." I threw on my robe, heart hammering against my ribs, and raced downstairs. The morning sun hadn't even fully crested the horizon, but the flashing yellow warning lights of construction vehicles stabbed through the pre-dawn gloom, casting grotesque shadows across our living room walls. I yanked open the front door and stumbled out onto the porch, my bare feet recoiling from the cold morning dew. Standing there like malevolent beasts on my carefully tended lawn were 3 massive construction vehicles, 2 bulldozers and an excavator. And orchestrating the scene? Brenda Milligan, of course, already dressed in her immaculate tennis whites, phone held high, recording everything with that infuriatingly smug smirk plastered on her face. Behind her, Arthur Pendleton stood puffed up with importance, waving a thick stack of papers like a victory flag. "Stop this madness," I shouted, my voice hoarse with disbelief and fury. "You have absolutely no right to be on my property. Get this equipment off my lawn immediately." The construction workers, looking somewhat uncertain, actually paused. One of them, a younger man, with surprisingly kind eyes, even started to take off his hard hat, looking genuinely troubled. That's when Brenda's shrill voice sliced through the tense dawn air. "We have every right. Don't you dare stop working. I'm recording this entire procedure for our official HOA records. They are in clear violation, and we have the emergency injunction right here." She turned her venomous gaze on me, her face twisted with a perverse satisfaction that made my stomach churn. "Maybe next time, Senator Vance, you'll learn to follow our community guidelines." I instinctively reached for my phone to call the police, but Arthur Pendleton stepped forward officiously, thrusting the court order practically into my face. "Don't bother," he sneered. "Judge Harrison signed this late yesterday afternoon. Your unsightly gate isn't just an aesthetic violation. It has been legally deemed an immediate threat to our property values and community safety standards." My hands shook with rage as I scanned the document. There it was, in stark black and white, an emergency injunction obtained ex parte, meaning they'd gone to court without even notifying me or giving me a chance to respond. A nauseating wave of injustice washed over me. For a fleeting moment, I considered revealing exactly who I was right then and there, unleashing the full force of my position. But years of navigating treacherous political waters had taught me one crucial lesson. Timing is everything. Instead, I took a deep breath, quelled the tremor in my hands, and started recording on my own phone. "Arthur," I said, my voice unnervingly calm despite the storm raging inside me. "That injunction specifically mentions only the gate. Why are your workers setting up heavy equipment near my front garden wall?" The direct question clearly made him pause, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. But before he could formulate a response, Brenda jumped in, eyes gleaming with malice. "Oh, the wall has to go too. It's all part of the same ugly, non-compliant security structure. You can't just build a fortress in our beautiful, harmonious neighborhood." She then turned dramatically to the small, bewildered crowd of neighbors now gathering on the sidewalk, many still in bathrobes and slippers. "This is what happens, people, when certain individuals show blatant disrespect for our community standards." The demolition crew chief, a burly man with Pendleton Construction emblazoned on his jacket, approached me holding another document. Of course, Arthur's own company conveniently got the contract. "Ma'am, I need you to step back onto your porch," he said gruffly. "We're authorized by court order to begin demolition work immediately. If you interfere, we'll be forced to call the authorities to have you removed." I watched, helpless rage churning in my gut, as they started on my beautiful gate. The screech of tortured metal echoed sickeningly in the quiet morning air as they brutally tore it from its hinges. Brenda provided a running commentary for her phone camera. "See everyone, the HOA is taking action. We protect your property values. This is justice being served." That's when Olivia, still in her pajamas, spoke up bravely from behind me, her voice trembling but clear. "Justice? You call this justice? You're destroying our home just because you don't like the way something looks?" Several neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Even some of the construction workers hesitated, looking uneasy. But Brenda was relentless. She stalked right up to my property line, phone still recording inches from my face. "Your mother should have thought about that before she decided to turn our beautiful neighborhood into some kind of prison block. Maybe this will finally teach your family a lesson about adhering to proper community standards." The front garden wall came down next. Chunks of brick and mortar crashed violently onto my carefully tended flower beds below, crushing the vibrant spring tulips and the rose bushes my late husband had lovingly planted years ago. Seeing them obliterated felt like a physical blow. Something inside me snapped, but I forced myself to remain outwardly calm, to keep recording. Every second of this illegal destruction, every arrogant word, would matter later. Through my phone screen, filming the demolition, I caught a crucial detail that made my blood run cold. The excavator was clearly crossing the property line markers. Small metal stakes my surveyor had placed just last year. They weren't just demolishing the gate and the recent wall extension, they were tearing down sections of the original garden wall that predated our ownership, sections clearly not part of any security structure. And the HOA's own rules explicitly required property line verification before any demolition work commenced. A new layer of outrage solidified into icy resolve. I quickly pulled up my official property survey app on my phone, documenting the encroachment with time-stamped photos and GPS coordinates. Arthur Pendleton must have noticed the shift in my expression, the sudden, focused intensity, because his bravado seemed to falter. He suddenly looked nervous. "Wrap it up! Quickly now!" he shouted anxiously to his crew. But I had everything I needed. I turned to address the growing crowd of neighbors, my voice ringing out clearly over the noise of the machinery. "I want everyone here to witness what is happening. Note the time, note who is present, and note exactly what is being destroyed and where. My calm, authoritative tone seemed to unnerve Brenda. Her smirk finally wavered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. As the sun finally crept over the horizon, painting the sky with mocking streaks of pink and gold, I watched them destroy $23,000 worth of my property. Property built with love and care over many years. But in their arrogant haste, they had made 3 critical, catastrophic mistakes: demonstrably improper legal notice, blatant property line violations during demolition, and outrageously biased contract allocation. I looked at my daughter Olivia, who was bravely fighting back tears, and squeezed her hand tightly. "Don't worry, sweetie," I murmured, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Sometimes you have to lose a battle to win the war." Little did Brenda Milligan and Arthur Pendleton know, but tomorrow's regularly scheduled State Housing Committee meeting was about to have some unexpected, urgent new business added to its agenda. And the war was just beginning. I stood there stoically in my robe, watching chunks of my historic garden wall crash onto the vibrant spring tulips my late husband had planted. Brenda's phone was still glued to her hand, recording her gleeful narration about justice being served for the benefit of her online audience. That's when Arthur Pendleton, puffed up with self-importance, strutted over, the demolition order clutched triumphantly in his hand, his gold HOA president pin gleaming ostentatiously in the strengthening morning sun. "Maybe next time you'll learn to follow our community rules, Senator," he sneered, attempting to shove the papers into my hand. I simply let them flutter unheeded to the ground beside the debris. The anger I'd been meticulously suppressing for months finally reached its boiling point, coalescing into a cold, hard fury. Behind him, my daughter Olivia appeared at the front door, still in her pajamas, tears streaming silently down her face as she watched, horrified, as our home was literally torn apart before her eyes. That's when the dam of my restraint finally broke. My phone erupted, buzzing incessantly. Maria, my chief of staff, her name flashed urgently on the screen, followed immediately by calls from 5 different local news stations. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. "Actually, Arthur," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, but cutting through the noise, straightening my robe as if preparing for a press conference. "I think it's high time we discussed House Bill 1472. You know, the comprehensive HOA reform bill, the one currently sitting on my desk at the state capitol." I paused, letting the words hang in the suddenly still air. "The bill I've been personally drafting and championing as the new chair of the State Housing Committee." The construction workers abruptly stopped their machines. The world seemed to grind to a halt. Brenda's phone lowered slowly, her mouth hanging open in stunned disbelief. Arthur Pendleton's face transformed from smug arrogance to utter slack-jawed shock faster than his signature could bounce a homeowner's check. You're, he stammered, his face turning an alarming shade of pale, his hands starting to visibly shake. "State Senator Eleanor Vance." "Yes," I confirmed coolly. "The very same person whose property you and your board have just illegally demolished without proper notice, without due process, and based on a fraudulent emergency injunction." I pulled out my own phone again, my movements deliberate, and dialed Maria. "Yes, Maria, good morning. Please immediately contact Attorney General Roberts. Tell him I am formally invoking Section 47B of the State Property Code regarding illegal demolition and trespass. And get Commissioner Diaz from the Department of Professional Regulation on the line for me right now. I want a full, immediate investigation launched into the Oak Ridge Estates HOA's financials, contract bidding processes, and complete permit history going back at least 5 years. Panic flared in Brenda's eyes. She tried to subtly slip away towards her house, but I wasn't finished with her yet. "Oh, and Brenda," I called out, my voice carrying easily, "those hundreds of photos and videos you've been obsessively taking, I'll require complete, unedited copies for the official investigation. All of them, including the ones you took specifically of my minor daughter, which you then shared, without parental permission, in your private neighborhood watch Facebook group." Checkmate. My security cameras had caught her trespassing numerous times to take those invasive photos. Every click of her camera, every nasty online comment, was now evidence against her. I had been meticulously documenting everything, patiently waiting for them to overplay their hand, to go too far. Today, blinded by their petty vendetta, they finally had. Olivia came down the porch steps then to stand beside me. Her tears dried, replaced by a look of fierce pride I recognized well. She'd witnessed me fight countless battles for constituents' rights at the Capitol, but she never thought she'd watch me fight so personally for our own home. Just then, a news van screeched to a halt at the end of the street, followed quickly by another. Brenda was now frantically trying to delete photos from her phone, but she didn't know my IT team at the Senate had already archived her entire publicly accessible social media history days ago as part of my preparation. Arthur Pendleton, desperate, tried one last pathetic power play. "The board vote. It was unanimous. We have witnesses." "Interesting," I replied calmly, unfazed. "Would these be the same board members who unanimously approved your wife's unlicensed, non-permitted home catering business operating out of your garage last month, Arthur? Or perhaps the same ones who conveniently ignored Brenda's clearly illegal fence height extension? My office possesses satellite imagery and county records showing quite a few interesting property modifications amongst current board members." His face crumpled. More neighbors were emerging now, phones out, recording the unfolding drama. The construction workers were hastily packing up their equipment, their supervisor having apparently received an urgent, panicked call from the city permit office, likely prompted by Maria. Through it all, I kept my voice steady, my posture straight and unwavering. Years of tense legislative negotiations had taught me that true power doesn't need to shout. "Maria," I spoke clearly into my phone, ensuring the nearby news microphones picked it up, "please make sure the press liaison gets copies of our entire file immediately. Yes, all of it. The selective enforcement documentation, the neighbor testimonies, the financial audits showing conflicts of interest, the evidence of harassment, everything." I turned, then, to address the growing crowd directly. "As your state senator," I declared, my voice resonating with newfound authority in my own front yard, "I believe fundamentally in transparency and accountability. The people of this state, the homeowners who invest their lives and savings into their communities, deserve to know exactly how certain HOA boards are abusing their power." Arthur Pendleton's hands were now visibly shaking. Brenda had retreated onto her own porch, still clutching her phone like a lifeline, a shield against the reality crashing down around her. The illegally obtained demolition order lay forgotten in the mud, nestled amongst the crushed remains of my husband's roses and chunks of my historic garden wall. I looked at my daughter and squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Honey, go get dressed for school. Mom's got some important work to do here." She smiled, a flash of understanding in her eyes. She knew this was about far more than just our gate now. This was about every single homeowner who had ever felt bullied, intimidated, and utterly powerless against arbitrary rules and deeply personal vendettas. As the news cameras started rolling, capturing the scene of destruction and the faces of the perpetrators, and my phone continued to buzz relentlessly with calls from other state officials offering support, I couldn't help but wonder how many other HOAs across our state, across our country, were operating under similar tyrannical regimes. By the time I was finished, they, and anyone like them, would wish they had never, ever touched my gate. Sleep was impossible that night. Fueled by adrenaline and righteous anger, I spent the hours coordinating with my staff and legal team. By morning, 3 stern-faced state investigators were at my door, their expressions grim as they reviewed the extensive photos and video documentation of the demolished wall and gate. Senator, based on this evidence and preliminary complaints already received, this goes much deeper than just your gate, lead investigator Diaz stated, spreading out years of Oak Ridge Estates HOA documents across my hastily cleared dining room table. The first bright red flag waved from Brenda Milligan's own backyard. Her luxurious, oversized pool, the one she constantly bragged about at every HOA social gathering, extended a blatant 4 feet beyond her legally recorded property line. I vividly remembered her condescending words to me just weeks before. "Some of us understand the importance of following the rules, Senator." The investigators quickly confirmed. No permit application on file, no formal HOA approval process documented, just a single faded sticky note found buried in the HOA archives saying, "Pool OK AP," Arthur Pendleton's initials. My phone buzzed continuously with texts and emails from neighbors. Now that the truth about my position was public knowledge, the dam of fear had broken. People finally felt safe coming forward. Mrs. Rodriguez, emboldened, sent photos of her rejected application for a simple, tasteful garden fence, a design nearly identical to the unapproved one Brenda had installed around her own expanded patio last summer. The Peters family, who lived down the block, shared a string of threatening emails showing they'd been fined an exorbitant $500 for their daughter's cheerful, rainbow-painted mailbox, while Arthur Pendleton's own son had an entire, unapproved sports mural emblazoned across his garage door without comment. The pattern was undeniable. I made sure the investigators attended the next scheduled HOA meeting. Brenda walked in with her usual arrogant smirk, but it vanished instantly when she saw the official state badges displayed prominently. Arthur Pendleton attempted to start the meeting as if nothing significant had occurred. First agenda item, review of unapproved homeowner modifications. His voice cracked noticeably when Investigator Diaz stood up coolly. "Excellent," Diaz interrupted smoothly. "Let's discuss unapproved modifications." He then proceeded to project detailed county property maps onto the large screen at the front of the room. Bright red circles starkly highlighted 23 separate, documented violations, all located exclusively at the homes of current or recent board members. Brenda's pool encroachment, Arthur's unpermitted garage, the treasurer's massive, unauthorized deck expansion, the secretary's illegally finished, unpermitted basement apartment. Each image landed like a hammer blow in the suddenly silent room. I watched with grim satisfaction as their faces shifted rapidly from feigned confusion to raw, naked fear. Olivia had been understandably quiet and withdrawn since the traumatic demolition, but that night she tentatively joined me in sorting through the flood of documents neighbors were now dropping off. "Mom," she whispered suddenly, pointing to a bank statement someone had anonymously mailed us. "Look at this." The HOA's supposedly sacrosanct emergency reserve fund had been making regular, substantial monthly payments disguised as consulting fees to a shell company, a company owned solely by Arthur Pendleton's wife. The state investigation swiftly confirmed years of systemic, corrupt selective enforcement. Families who dared to question the board or challenge Brenda's authority faced immediate, often fabricated, violations, escalating fines, and veiled threats. Those who played along, mostly Brenda's inner circle of friends and allies, enjoyed blatant exemptions, expedited approvals for their own projects, and turned a blind eye to the abuse of others. My gate wasn't an emergency. It was targeted punishment for refusing to bow to their petty tyranny. Local news vans became a permanent fixture on our street the following morning. Brenda attempted to sneak out her back door to avoid the cameras, but was met with the sight of her illegal pool extension now marked off with bright orange surveyor's tape. She saw me watching from my porch, and for the first time, her carefully constructed mask of suburban superiority completely cracked. "You don't understand," she shouted desperately across the lawn, her voice shrill. "We kept this neighborhood perfect. We protected our values." I walked slowly towards my demolished garden wall, where the crushed remains of my husband's roses still lay. "Perfect for whom, Brenda?" I asked quietly, letting the question hang in the air. The growing crowd of neighbors, investigators, and reporters waited for her answer. She offered none, just scurried frantically to her car, dropping her ever-present phone on her driveway in her haste. The screen lit up momentarily with a frantic message notification from Arthur. "Delete everything now." But it was far too late. The HOA's carefully built house of cards, predicated on intimidation and hypocrisy, was collapsing spectacularly, and the upcoming state ethics hearing promised to bring even bigger, more damaging surprises. Investigators had already uncovered disturbing connections between the board's selective enforcement patterns and a potentially larger local real estate manipulation scheme, one that would soon make my demolished gate look like just the tip of a very dirty iceberg. That evening, as neighbors gathered spontaneously on my lawn, sharing relieved hugs and their own long-suppressed HOA horror stories under the setting sun, Olivia tugged gently on my sleeve. "Mom, look!" Brenda Milligan was in her own backyard, frantically trying to measure her pool enclosure with a flimsy tape measure, watched by state investigators taking copious notes. I couldn't help but smile, a weary but satisfied smile. Tomorrow's official findings presentation would make her pool dimensions the very least of her worries. The real question now wasn't just about my gate, or even the breathtaking corruption within the Oak Ridge Estates HOA. As I watched Investigator Diaz meticulously photograph Brenda's frantic, futile measuring attempts, a chilling thought struck me. How many other neighborhoods, how many other homeowners across our state were suffering silently under the same kind of unchecked, petty tyranny? I picked up my phone, scrolling through my contacts to call my fellow senators on the Housing Committee. This was about to become much, much bigger than our little subdivision. Walking into the hallowed halls of the state capitol building the following week felt different. My hands were steady now as I clutched the thick folder overflowing with irrefutable evidence. The morning news programs were already running B-roll footage of my demolished home on a loop as I passed through the security checkpoint. In the main waiting area, I saw them, Brenda Milligan and Arthur Pendleton, sitting nervously side by side, their expensive lawyer whispering urgently between them. They clearly hadn't expected the HOA investigation hearing to be held here, in the heart of state power. I walked straight past them, heading directly to my office, allowing myself a small measure of satisfaction at the shocked expressions on their faces as they finally registered the nameplate on the door. Senator Eleanor Vance, Chair, State Housing Committee. Maria, my ever-efficient chief of staff, rushed in almost immediately, her arms laden with more files. "Senator, the phones haven't stopped ringing since your story broke," she reported breathlessly. "We've received hundreds, literally hundreds, of formal complaints about HOA abuses from homeowners all across the state. Your experience has opened the floodgates." The hearing room buzzed with anticipation. News cameras lined the back wall. Reporters scribbled furiously in notebooks. I straightened the jacket of my suit, took a calming breath, and assumed my usual seat at the head of the committee chair's elevated desk. I deliberately caught Brenda's eye in the front row, enjoying the way her jaw literally dropped as the reality of the situation finally seemed to penetrate her arrogance. After months of her talking down to me, treating me like dirt beneath her expensive running shoes, she was now about to testify before me. "This hearing of the State Housing Committee will come to order," I announced, my voice steady and clear, resonating through the suddenly silent room despite the butterflies in my stomach. Today, we are discussing Senate Bill 580, the Homeowner Protection Act, legislation sparked, in part, by recent disturbing events in my own district. I held up large, clear photographs of my demolished gate and wall for emphasis. But let me be unequivocally clear, this is not just about me. One by one, homeowners from across the state stepped forward to the witness microphone. An elderly veteran, his voice trembling with emotion, described being fined thousands of dollars for installing a medically necessary wheelchair ramp deemed aesthetically discordant. A tearful single mother recounted how her children's beloved treehouse, built by their late grandfather, was summarily torn down by her HOA while they were away at school, citing a newly invented height restriction. Each heart-wrenching story caused Brenda to sink lower and lower in her seat. Then came the documented proof of hypocrisy, the official property records my team had meticulously uncovered. I projected them onto the large screens flanking the room. Brenda's illegal pool expansion somehow granted instant, informal approval. Arthur Pendleton's massive, unpermitted garage addition, mysteriously overlooked by HOA inspectors for years. Board members' relatives consistently being awarded lucrative landscaping and maintenance contracts without any competitive bidding process. "Mrs. Thompson," I addressed Brenda directly, calling her formally to testify under oath. "Could you please explain to this committee and to the citizens of this state why my fully compliant, professionally installed security gate constituted such an emergency violation that it required immediate, pre-dawn demolition without proper notice, while your own significantly non-permitted, boundary-violating pool expansion was apparently approved via sticky note in a single day?" She stumbled through a pathetic litany of excuses, rambling incoherently about maintaining property values and protecting neighborhood character. Her high-priced lawyer kept attempting to whisper frantic instructions in her ear, but Brenda, clearly rattled, wouldn't stop talking, digging herself deeper with every evasive word. "And Mr. Pendleton," I turned my attention to Arthur, who was now sweating profusely through his expensive silk suit. "These financial records, obtained via subpoena by state investigators, clearly show that the demolition company contracted to destroy my home, Pendleton Construction, is in fact owned and operated by your brother-in-law. Would you care to explain that apparent conflict of interest to the committee?" The room erupted in shocked whispers. Arthur's lawyer immediately advised him to plead the Fifth Amendment, refusing to answer on grounds of potential self-incrimination. But the damage was done. The blatant corruption was laid bare for all to see. My colleagues on the committee exchanged grim, knowing looks. This was undeniably bigger and dirtier than just one rogue HOA board. With the evidence established, I unveiled the specifics of the new bill, the Homeowner Protection Act. I explained each provision in clear, simple terms designed to empower homeowners and curb abuses. An absolute ban on selective enforcement, strict conflict of interest regulations for board members and management companies, mandated due process and court review before any non-emergency demolition or imposition of significant liens, establishment of transparent, impartial appeals processes, clear, standardized rules applicable to everyone within a community. During the final committee vote, I saw Olivia slip quietly into the back of the hearing room. My daughter had missed school that day, with my full permission, of course, to be here to witness this moment. She gave me a small, proud thumbs up as my colleagues on the committee raised their hands one by one in support. The bill passed unanimously. As Brenda Milligan and Arthur Pendleton hurried out of the room afterward, desperately trying to duck the swarm of cameras and reporters shouting questions, I heard Olivia telling one journalist nearby, "That's my mum. She taught me that when bullies break your toys, you don't just get mad. You change the rules so they can't break anyone else's toys ever again." Outside the hearing room doors, other HOA residents, energized and hopeful, were already lining up, eager to share their own stories with my staff, seeking help and guidance. My simple security gate, a symbol of a mother's desire to protect her child, had somehow unlocked something much bigger, unleashing a statewide demand for fairness and accountability. Looking at their hopeful faces, I realized this legislative victory was just the beginning of a much longer fight. Standing at the podium in the ornate chamber of the state capitol a few weeks later, I watched as the final vote tally confirmed it. The Homeowner Protection Act had passed the full legislature without a single dissenting vote. The look of utter disbelief mingled with impotent rage on Brenda Milligan's face. Watching the proceedings from the public gallery was worth every single moment of stress and anxiety her reign of terror had inflicted on my family over the past year. Cameras flashed as I ceremonially signed the new law into effect. "This is a victory," I declared firmly into the cluster of microphones, "for every single homeowner in this state who has ever faced unfair treatment, arbitrary rules, or abuse of power by their HOA board." Behind Brenda, I could see Arthur Pendleton, the disgraced former HOA president, nervously tugging at his collar. The parallel state ethics investigation had uncovered far more than just their vindictive vendetta against my gate. It revealed years of financial mismanagement, conflicts of interest, and systematic bullying. Accountability had arrived. Poetic justice unfolded swiftly back in Oak Ridge Estates. 3 large, moving trucks lined Brenda Milligan's driveway the very next morning. Her illegal pool extension, flagged under the new law's stringent inspection requirements for property transfers, would need to be entirely removed before she could sell the house, a costly undertaking. Arthur Pendleton's unpermitted garage addition had already received official demolition notices from the city. The very rules they had twisted and selectively weaponized to torment others were now being applied fairly and firmly against them. My daughter Olivia watched from our kitchen window as Brenda frantically directed the movers, her usual air of superiority completely gone. "Mum," Olivia mused thoughtfully, "remember when she told Ashley and Kevin they weren't allowed to play with me anymore because we were troublemakers?" I nodded, putting my arm around her shoulders. "Now look who's leaving the neighborhood in disgrace." As if on cue, a local news van pulled up just as Brenda was awkwardly trying to load her collection of precious, kitschy garden gnomes into the back of her SUV. I hadn't called them. It turned out several neighbors, finally free from intimidation, had gleefully tipped off reporters about the HOA queen being forced to move due to her own violations coming to light. Brenda's face flushed crimson when she spotted the cameras. For once, she didn't rush forward seeking an interview. Instead, she practically dove into her car and sped away. My phone buzzed, a text from Maria. The State Ethics Board had finalized their review. Arthur Pendleton and 3 other former Oak Ridge Estates board members would be paying substantial personal fines for years of documented selective enforcement, fiduciary negligence, and illegal property decisions. Their vindictive, illegally executed demolition of my wall had ultimately cost them their reputations and, in some cases, their careers. Arthur lost his real estate license due to ethics violations, and Brenda was forced to shut down her unlicensed home-based property consultation business. Later that day, I walked out to check my mail, nodding warmly to Mrs. Rodriguez across the street. She had been one of the first neighbors to bravely testify at the hearing about how the previous board had relentlessly targeted her beautiful, traditional holiday papal picado banners while completely ignoring Brenda's tacky, year-round flock of plastic flamingos. Now, thanks to the new law's provisions protecting cultural expression, Mrs. Rodriguez's vibrant banners flew proudly from her porch. A car slowed down as it approached my house. I recognized Brenda's oldest son, Kevin, behind the wheel. He hesitantly rolled down his window. "Senator Vance?" he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. I just wanted to apologize for, Mom made us do a lot of stuff, say things we knew wasn't right. I smiled gently and walked over to his car. "Water under the bridge, Kevin," I said sincerely. "Sometimes the best and hardest lessons in life come from watching how not to treat people. Learn from it." He nodded gratefully and drove away. Olivia came running out moments later, waving an envelope. "Mom, the neighborhood association election ballots are here." The Oak Ridge Estates HOA had been completely reformed under the strict oversight mandated by the new state law, with enforced term limits, transparent financial reporting, and clear election procedures. To my surprise, several of my neighbors had nominated me to serve as the president of the new reformed association board. I thought about how this entire ordeal had started, with one simple security gate installed out of a mother's fear. Looking at my beautiful new gate, professionally installed just last week under the clear, fair guidelines of the reformed HOA, I felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. Not because I had exacted revenge, though accountability had certainly been served, but because I had been able to use my unexpected position, my platform, to help protect and empower every homeowner in our state. Just then, Brenda Milligan's car drove slowly past my house one last time. She stared intently, her expression unreadable, before accelerating quickly down the street and out of sight. Good riddance. My phone rang. It was the governor. "Senator Vance," she began warmly, "congratulations again on the passage of the Homeowner Protection Act. It's already making waves. In fact, there's something you should know. We've been getting calls from legislative leaders in several other states. They want to copy your bill, use it as a model for their own HOA reforms. How would you feel?" She paused. "About potentially taking this initiative national?" I looked over at Olivia, who was beaming with pride, remembering all those late nights she'd helped me research similar cases of HOA abuse across the country. That evening, our doorbell rang. It was Kevin Milligan again, this time with his younger sister, Ashley, standing shyly beside him. "Senator Vance," Ashley piped up hesitantly, Can we help put up campaign signs for your re-election? Mum's moving in with Aunt Susan in the next county, but we're staying here with Dad. He says you taught everybody around here a really important lesson about using power the right way. This story serves as a stark reminder that power, whether held by an HOA board member or a state legislator, must be wielded responsibly and ethically. Abuse of power, fueled by personal vendettas or greed, inevitably leads to corruption and harm. However, it also demonstrates that knowledge is power. Understanding the rules, documenting injustices, and knowing who holds the real authority can be crucial in fighting back. Ultimately, True strength lies not in bullying or intimidation, but in upholding fairness, transparency, and using one's influence, whatever it may be, to protect the rights of others and build stronger, more just communities. Have you ever dealt with an unfair HOA? What steps did you take? Share your experiences and thoughts in the comments below. Let's learn from each other. And please subscribe for more stories about standing up for what's right.